of the Biden administration's arguments here. They agreed that it drew lines based on sex, because if someone who their birth sex is male and they can't get estrogen treatments to transition, if their birth sex was female, they could do so. They also agreed with the argument that this discriminated against transgender people as a class. And so they agreed that this law needed to be held to that heightened standard. Now, two of the liberal justices went a little bit further. Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, they said that they would have went on to go ahead and really doubt that Tennessee's law would pass that heightened standard. Justice Elena Kagan, she did not join that part of the dissent. She said she would have left that for the lower court to decide. But either way, it doesn't matter too much because they were in dissent. They didn't win here. And just to give you an idea of how strongly and the force of their dissent, Justice Sotomayor actually in the courtroom yesterday read it aloud from the bench, which the justices really reserve for only a handful of cases when they really want to stress their disagreement.
Okay, so it's not just Tennessee. There are now more than 20 states with laws banning transgender care for minors. What's going to happen in those states?
This decision is expected to, by and large, greenlight those laws, which those laws, too, had come under legal challenges. Many were in the lower courts. Some had been bubbling up to the Supreme Court. So it's really this decision is rejecting the thrust of the arguments that plaintiffs have been making all across the country. That being said, though, this decision does really leave unresolved other questions about bathroom use for transgender individuals, also the question of transgender athletes. So we still could expect a lot of activity on that, both at the Supreme Court and the lower courts in the weeks and months to come.
And I'm wondering, what's to stop parents and their children from traveling to states where it's legal if they want to receive transition care? I mean, it's kind of like abortion in that sense. If you really want to prevent it, opponents would need a nationwide ban, which is an even more heavy-handed government approach.
Yeah, and there are some advocates who are now calling for that nationwide ban in response to this decision. But at least as the landscape stands now, it really is a similar way to how the abortion landscape looks, in that parents are able to drive their children across state lines to a place where it's legal, if they want their child to get that care. In fact, it's exactly what one of the plaintiffs in this very case in Tennessee has been doing, the Williams family, which says that it has now driven their transgender daughter to now 4 different states to get care. In a New York Times op-ed following this decision, this transgender teen's mother, Samantha Williams, wrote that she was mourning the Supreme Court decision, but saying that she is going to, in her words, she said that she's going to find a way to keep her child healthy regardless.
It's worth noting that the big, beautiful reconciliation bill currently being considered by Congress contains an amendment that would prevent Medicaid, CHIP, the Affordable Care Act, from using federal funds, taxpayer funds, to pay for transition care. But speaking of the Supreme Court, financial disclosures were released for the justices this week. Book deals and summer teaching gigs in far-flung places, those are just some of the perks of the nation's highest court. Tell us more about what we learned.
Yeah, Drew, really these book payments were the bulk of the news that we got from these financial disclosures that covered the year 2024. The justice who took in the most book payments was Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. She reported a just over $2 million worth of payments from Penguin Random House, which published her memoir, Lovely One, back in the fall. Justice Jackson also disclosed that her publisher has been reimbursing her for the various stops that she's been making all across the country on what has really been a nationwide book tour in between court sessions this term. Now, Justice Jackson is far from the only justice to have gotten book payments. Justice Neil Gorsuch got some more book royalties. He has a new recent book out. Also, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who's now written a series of children's books. She, too, reported additional book royalties. Now, to be clear, these book payments are completely legal. There's no restriction on them. There is a restriction on the justice's outside income. It's about $33,000, but it doesn't apply to book royalties. So what they're doing here is legal, but nonetheless, it's come under a lot more scrutiny, particularly after an Associated Press investigation 2 years ago that found Justice Sotomayor's taxpayer-funded court staff had actually been pushing places that she was visiting to buy more of her books. So still just one layer of all this new ethics scrutiny at the High Court.
Yeah, and it's not just happened with Justice Sotomayor. These financial disclosures have been under scrutiny for other reasons as well, especially since it was revealed that some of the justices received these lavish gifts from wealthy donors. Is it the same issue here, that maybe what we don't know and what's missing from these disclosures could be important information to understand to tell this story?
I think, Drew, the lack of gifts that were disclosed on these new disclosures was really quite notable. The only justice to disclose any gifts was Justice Sotomayor. She disclosed that a theater in Kansas City flew her out to go visit a theater version of one of her children's books. She also reported two other gifts, one of which she said she donated to the court. But other than that, there was no other justice that reported gifts last year. Now, there's a few potential explanations here. One is the fact that there is a threshold. Gifts under $480 don't have to be reported. So it's always possible that there are more gifts that we just don't know about because they're under the threshold. It's also possible that there's been a change in behavior among the justices because of some new guidance that has gone into effect over the last few years regarding what gifts they have to report, specifically narrowing one of the exemptions from their disclosures. And then, of course, it's always possible that in response to all of this public pressure that the Supreme Court has seen over the last few years over their ethics, specifically on Justice Thomas and some of the trips that has accepted in years past, that maybe some of these justices are no longer accepting the gifts that they once were.
Lastly, we do expect more decisions from the Supreme Court tomorrow. What cases are you looking for?
Well, Drew, we are now here in the final stretch of June. We have 16 opinions to go, and there are several big ones remaining. One case in particular I'll have my eye on going into tomorrow is a First Amendment challenge to Texas's law that requires adult websites to verify that their users are at least 18 years old. This is a case that was argued back in January. It's one of the longest pending cases now, so we've got our eyes on that one. Also, of course, have our eyes on the fight over President Trump's birthright citizenship executive order, specifically whether federal district judges, when they found that it was unconstitutional, did they have the authority to block his executive order nationwide? There's also a fight over Louisiana's congressional map with big implications for racial gerrymandering. And of course, the case involving LGBTQ themed books in schools. This case out of Montgomery County, Maryland, and whether the school district there has to provide parents an opt-out option on religious grounds from having their elementary school age children be in language arts curriculums with those books. So a lot of big cases remaining. As you mentioned, more opinions coming tomorrow, but also a lot of these opinions will be coming next week.
All right, always interesting insight on the courts. If people want to follow your work, head over to thehill.com. They should subscribe to the Gavel newsletter, and they can get it all in their inbox. Zach Schoenfeld, thanks so much.
Thanks, Drew.